We continue the sheet Uri in Gemara. The Gemara says that when a poor person comes to ask for a contribution either food or money, specifically provisions for his needs, the Torah says you are required to give him all that he needs. Provide for him all that he needs, of course, if he can afford it. But you are not required to make him wealthy. You don't have to convert a poor man to a wealthy man. But whatever he is lacking, you must give him. And what's meant by what he is lacking? It means that every poor person has a different nature. One poor person is satisfied with a loaf of bread. If that's all he's lacking, give him a loaf of bread. The second person is very poor, but he may have come from a wealthy family. He suddenly lost all his wealth. To give him a loaf of bread is not giving him what he needs. He's accustomed to eating meat. He's accustomed to having luxury. What he needs is this luxury. For example, if he's accustomed to riding on a horse, in those days, the Gemara speaks of a horse. Today we'd say he's accustomed to riding in a caddy. Accustomed to riding on a horse. And a wealthy person had a slave run in front of the horse to clear the path. And you must provide a horse and a slave for this poor man. The Gemara says, as an example, Hillel Hazakin, the elder Hillel, one of the oldest, greatest tzaddikim of the Gemara, the Rabbi R Nachman and Zakkai, he once, when he was a Nasi, a poor man came to him who came from a respectable family, and he acquired a horse for this poor man and a slave to run before the horse. One time, he was not able to obtain a slave at the moment. Well, Hillel Hazakin himself ran before this poor man for a length of 3 miles, which is the usual top length that a slave could run at one time. He did it himself to show how he provided the needs of the poor. He later tells about a case in Galil where the people there had to provide for another poor man who was accustomed to eating fancy food, had to provide a special large sum of meat each day. Not ordinary meat, but expensive certain type of bird's meat, like the dove. And this, of course, is very expensive. Still, this is what he was accustomed to, this is what they gave him. The Gemara says that a poor man once came to Rabbi Nachman, and Rabbi Nachman asked this poor man, what are you accustomed to eating? And he said, I come from a home where I always ate meat that's very rich, juicy, plus wine. Not ordinary wine, but old wine. Very expensive wine. Rabbi Nachman said to him, well, I'm not rich myself. In fact, I'm poor. All I have is just vegetable soup. A poor vegetable soup. You want to share with me? Good. The poor man had no alternative, and he shared with him. He ate this little soup with him, and the poor man died. He was so delicately brought up that to eat this ordinary type of food was more than he could stomach, and he passed away. Rabbi Nachman said, his students, woe is to this poor man whom Rabbi Nachman killed. By taking him and giving this food, he killed him. And the students said, we don't understand your statement. You just say, woe is to Rabbi Nachman who killed this poor man. When you say you killed him, why do you say woe is to him? Rabbi Nachman answered, woe is to him that he allowed himself to become so delicately brought up that he couldn't eat like a regular normal person. So it's his problem, not mine. He later says that a poor man came to Rava once. Rava asked him, according to law, what are you accustomed to eating? The poor man said, I'm accustomed to eating stuffed bird and old wine. Rava asked this poor man, aren't you inconsiderate? You want the public to provide you with such expensive type of food? Isn't this placing too heavy a burden on people? This poor man replied to Ravah. He said, am I taking anything from the public, the people? Everything I eat comes to me from Hashem. The pasuk says, Einei chol enecha yisabenu. The eyes of all people look up to you, Hashem. You give them their food, the ito, in his time. You give them their food in their time. What's in his time? Individual. The answer is, this means Hashem gives every single individual the food he needs at the time he needs it. At the time he needs it. Which means now it's my time to eat. I'll get the food now not from public but from Hashem. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the door, and the Ravah's sister came in. He had not seen his sister for 13 years. She came inside. They were very happy for this reunion. And she said, I have a gift for you. I have a stuffed bird and old wine. And that said, what's this? This is a definite sign from heaven. He said to the poor man, I want to ask you, Mechila, for the fact that I question you, and this thing you just taught me, that Hashem provides each person in his time. Here I see a sign from heaven. This is what you need. Right at that moment. 13 years I haven't seen my sister. She could have come an hour later, or a day later, or 2 days ago. She came just at this very second. You were right. I ask you, Mechila, this is your food, not mine. Go eat now. Even it says that Mar Ukva, who was the chief rabbi, had a very poor man in his neighborhood. And Mar Ukva was accustomed to sending this poor man 4 coins a day. But he didn't want the poor man to know where the money came from, because that's embarrassing. He'd feel obligated. He would place this 4 coins in the doorpost. There was a sort of an alcove in the doorpost. He'd place it there, and let the poor man come to take it out of this doorpost. Every day the poor man knew that this was the place he'd find it. It was his stepson. But this Ani was very curious. He wanted to know who his benefactor was. So the Ani decided that he's going to stay and watch that place and see who deposits those coins there. One day he waited there, and it happened that Malukva was coming by with his wife together, and he walked over to the doorpost. He looked around and saw no one was watching. He bent down to deposit the money, and he suddenly noticed someone coming out from behind. So he dropped the money and he ran. He and his wife ran. This Ani ran after them. He wanted to see who it was. They came to an oven that had just been extinguished. The coals had just been put out, but the oven was still burning. They opened the oven door. It was large ovens that you could stand in it. They went into this oven. They closed the door behind them. They stood there. On the floor of that oven was fiery, burning fire. So Marukva felt his feet beginning to burn. He couldn't stay alone. His wife said to him, don't worry, put your feet on top of mine. So he remained cool. He did it. They were cool. He felt very disheartened. What's this? My zechut is not enough to protect me from fire. My wife's zechut is? My wife is big, greater than I am? What kind of a man is this? So she said to him, don't feel badly. The zechut of being saved from fire or death comes through the mitzvah of giving tzedakah. Now, your giving tzedakah is very nice, admirable. You give constantly a person asking, you give him a coin. When you give a coin, he can't eat it. This means that you're giving him something which he must first go out to purchase food with. And the time you give it until the time he eats takes a while, and he loses that opportunity to eat immediately. When Ani comes to my house, to the door, I give him food instead of a coin. So that interval of time is saved. Therefore, I have a bigger zechut in tzedakah, and that's why I am more immune to fire than you are. And then it says, by the way, question, why was Marukva so anxious that the poor man does not see him? And he doesn't see him. To the extent we can understand, he doesn't want to embarrass him, fine. But to go into a fiery oven, you have to go inside to practically suicide. Let's say if you didn't have that zechut, that holiness of being safe from fire, he could have been destroyed in that oven, chas v'shalom. And he wasn't positive he's that great. He went inside that oven knowing that he might die in that oven. Why did he do this? He made answers because we know, we learned before, that rather than embarrass a person, it's better for one to let himself be burned alive. Better suffer burning alive rather than embarrass somebody publicly. So great is the sin of embarrassing a person. We find this in the case of Tamar. Tamar and Yehudah. When Tamar was caught, she was pregnant, and she was pregnant through Yehudah. They thought she had committed adultery, and since she was the daughter of a Kohen, it was punishable by fire, or death by fire. And as she was going out, being taken to her death, she said, "Send this ring to Yehudah, and tell him the owner of this ring is the one that made me pregnant," which means Yehudah himself. She did not say to the people, "Yehudah is the one that made me pregnant, therefore I'm innocent." Rather than embarrass Yehudah publicly, she decided to go into the fire if he would not admit it. Of course, he admitted it and she was saved. But we see from there that it is better to die through fire than to embarrass someone, and this is why Man Ukra was willing to go into the oven rather than embarrass this ani. The question is, of course, again, true, admittedly, a person would rather die than embarrass someone. But was Man Ukra guilty in embarrassing someone? It was the ani who was bringing embarrassment himself. He didn't go out to embarrass the ani came running after him. So what kind of embarrassment is that? He's willing to have himself seen. Why should this be considered embarrassing someone to go into the fire yet? The answer is that it is true that the ani was willing to accept this so-called embarrassment. But that's only because the ani did not know this was the chief rabbi. Had the ani come face to face with Man Ukva, he would have turned red and white from embarrassment. This Man Ukva did not want to happen to the ani. He wanted to hide his identity from the ani, knowing that it caused the ani so much embarrassment, discomfort. Therefore, he was willing to go into the oven, from which, of course, he was saved. You know, there's another case with Man Ukva. There was an ani in his neighborhood to whom he would send 400 coins every Erev Kippur. Now, the reason he would send that much Erev Kippur is simply because that day, a person needs help from heaven, kapara, and any tzedakah he gives then is to his credit. Therefore, he would send 400 coins to this certain ani on Erev Kippur. One Erev Kippur, he told his son, take these 400 coins, $400, and bring it to the ani. The son took this money. He went to the ani. He returned shortly. He said to Man Ukva, his father, he does not need the money. It's not necessary to give it to him anymore. His father said, why do you say it's not necessary? Because this ani is apparently not that poor. I said they were pouring old wine for him, expensive food. He's that kind of food, he doesn't need charity money. And Ukva said, is that so? This person is that refined that he eats only such food? I made a mistake then. In that case, my son, here's $800, go bring it to him. This the son did. As an example, of course, of the type of tzedakah, of Baal tzedakah that Man Ukva was. By the way, it's interesting to note, the Yemena says, that when are you required to give tzedakah to a poor man? At what point is a person considered poor? And at what point is he no longer allowed to take charity? The person who has money and takes charity is committing a sin of stealing. So when is a person permitted to take tzedakah and when is he not? The Yemena says that if a person has $200, he possesses $200, he's not permitted to take tzedakah. he has less than $200, you may give him tzedakah that he can take. And the Yudayat says that there's a sign, because the word tzedakah, tzadik dalet kuf hey, is begimatria, the numerical value was 199. That means up to 199, it is a mitzvah to give tzedakah. The person who owns more than that, he does not fall in the category of one who needs tzedakah. The question here is, though, if at the $200 mark he's no longer an ani, he requires no more tzedakah, why did Menachem send him $400? He paid him $200, he's finished. The answer is, this the Gemara says too, is that an ani who has $200 cannot take a penny even for tzedakah. But if he has anything less than $200, he may take small amounts up to $200 and stop there. But he's also allowed to take one large amount, no matter how large it is. If it's one netina, one donation, if he has, let's say, only $150, he can take one donation of even $10,000. As long as at that moment he owns less than $200, he can take any size donation. And therefore, in this case, when the guy gave to this ani who had less than $200, he gave him $400, and then, of course, $800 to provide his needs according to the way he was accustomed to living. The Rebbe says now that when Menachem was about to pass away, he said to his son, "Bring me my accounting book, my records. I want to see how much tzedakah I gave during my lifetime." He took the account he had always written down, and he found the total was 7,000 pure dinarim. That's like gold dinarim. 7,000 of these very expensive amounts. Could be a dinar, that's $25 or $100. Total amount of his lifetime charity was 7,000 of these dinarim. Menachem said, "I have so light an amount to take with me on such a long journey. I'm going on a very long journey now, up to heaven. A very dangerous journey. I must have more provisions than this." He immediately said, 50% of my possessions I hereby give to tzedakah. The other 50, the other half, is for inheritance for my children. He then asks, we had just learned the fact that a person who gives charity is allowed to give up to 20%. He's not supposed to squander more than 20% to tzedakah. How could he now give 50%? The Gemara answers that's only during a person's lifetime. Then he's not supposed to give more than 20% at a time, because he might lose his possessions. He might have to resort to tzedakah himself. But when a person is dying, after death, there's no further problems about what he'll need later on. He won't need anything. This is the moment he needs it now. Might give even 50% of his money to tzedakah. Even it says Rabbi Abba, custom was to take a bundle of coins in a knapsack, sort of a kerchief, place it over his back behind him, and let the poor come and take from this knapsack whatever they need. He trusted them. And of course, there'd be no embarrassment for them, because they wouldn't have to face him while they're taking the money. But he would also look from the corner of his eye and watch the thieves. He could recognize the known thieves and be very happy to help themselves to a share of this money. He watched out for these thieves. But if he knew it was a poor man, he'd turn his face away completely, with the poor man to not be embarrassed. The man says Rabbi Chanina had a poor man in his neighborhood. He was accustomed to sending this poor man 4 coins every Erev Shabbat. One Erev Shabbat, he sent these 4 coins to his wife. He sent his wife these 4 coins to this poor man, and she came back and she said to Rabbi Chanina, this poor man does not need the money. It's not necessary to give it to him. So he asked her, what did you see that makes you arrive at this decision? She said, I heard the poor man speaking to his wife and saying what do we eat on today? Do we eat on linen tablecloths, or do we eat on expensive gold brocaded cloths? But he has said, in this case, he doesn't need the money. This proves that he is a fraud. This thing that says we owe a debt of thanks to these thieves, these impostors, these frauds. We should thank them very heartily, because can you imagine a person who is approached for tzedakah by a poor man and refuses to give? The Torah says Hashem avenges this act. And now that we have these thieves, these frauds, we can always say, well, we thought this was a fraud. Why should I waste money on a fraud? And this excuse could help to a degree. These frauds save us from any punishment from heaven. It says, however, anybody who closes his eyes to tzedakah, when a person comes by, a poor man comes by begging, and he pretends not to see him, but he tries to hide from him, this is equivalent to avodah zarah. Same is considered the same sin as a person who worships idols. So serious a crime is this. Because we find in the Torah the word Belial. Belial means the worst degree of evil. This speaks about those who turned away from Hashem and went to worship idols. The same thing we find by turning your eyes and heart away from the poor. It says also Belial. It means that God compares these two, showing that both are equal. The same degree, equal degree of evil to turn away from a poor man as it is to turn to idol worship. The Gemara says that a person who pretends to be blind, or a person who pretends to be ill, or a person who pretends to be a cripple, in order to collect tzedakah, that person can be assured that he will not leave this world. Before he dies, he is going to become exactly what he pretends to be. The person pretends to be blind, he's going to end up blind. The cripple will become a cripple because of the fact that he pretended this in order to receive tzedakah. Now, of course, this is the Ferush, the Mishnah. Mishnah says that any person who pretends to be blind or a cripple will become that. What does the Gemara here add to that point? The answer is that the Gemara adds this: not only if a person doesn't need charity, he has money, he wants to make extra by fooling the public, and he pretends to be blind, that person will turn blind. But even if a person is in the category where he's committed to take tzedakah, and he only adds this defect of blindness or being a cripple in order to be able to receive more tzedakah than he would otherwise, even this is so much against the law that he too will be punished for it. A person should go with truth, and he is entitled to, may receive tzedakah, but he should do it in a normal, honest manner. The Gemara says that Rav Anan, the very holy tzadik, he used to have Eliyahu Hanavi come to him every day. But when he had a question, a problem, he would send to Rav Huna, who was apparently superior to him. One time, there was a problem with a woman who came to him in reference to inheritance. The father had passed away. He had left sons and a daughter, this woman. The problem with inheritance, we know that the law is that the sons inherit all the money from the father. What does a daughter get? A straight 10%. The sons divide equally, except for the Bechor, the eldest, they get double. The daughters get 10%. If, let's say, there's one daughter and 4 sons, The 4 sons receive 25% each. The daughter gets 10% of that money, of the total, of each one. If there's 1 son and 1 daughter, a son gets 90%, the daughter gets 10%. In this case, the woman came to Rav Anan, and she was in Rav Huna's neighborhood. So Rav Anan sent this message to Rav Huna, these words: Rav Huna, my friend, but he did not use the word rabbi. Just the name alone, rabbi, without rabbi. Huna, my friend, greetings, peace be with you. When this woman comes before you, please collect for her 1/10 of the inheritance of her father. When this messenger came, this message was brought to Rav Huna. Rav Huna was sitting and teaching Torah, and his student, Rav Sheshet, was sitting in front of him. When he got this message, Rav Huna turned to Rav Sheshet and said these words: Go tell Rav Anan. Before I tell you what to tell him, I hereby dictate that chidduv upon the one who does not repeat these words exactly. That means I'm commanding you to tell Rav Anan these exact words. If you fail to tell him these exact words that I state, you are in chidduv. The exact words are Rav Anan, Rav Anan, without the word Rav. Without the word Rabbi, just his name twice. Do you want me to collect the 10% from the real estate, the ground, or from all types of his possessions, tangible items, furniture, cash, clothing, and so on? And secondly, who sits at the head by a marazecha? By a marazecha, who sits at the head? Rav Sheshet went before Rav Anan. Naturally, he felt very badly, very incompetent to say these words. He came to Rav Anan and he said these words: You are a rabbi. Rav Huna is the rabbi of this rabbi I'm speaking to. Rav Huna is your rabbi. To me, you are a rabbi, but Rav Huna is still higher. He's your rabbi. And there is a chidduv on one, meaning myself, who does not say this statement I'm about to say. But I want to add that if not for this chidduv, I would never dare to say these words. Know that I am not guilty of saying these words. The words are Rav Anan, again without the words rabbi, Anan twice, from property, real estate, or from all tangible items. And who sits at the head of Marazecha? He left. Rav Anan immediately went to Menachem, who was the chief rabbi, and he said to him very plaintively, look at this. Look at how Rav Huna sent a message to me. He said to me, Anan, Anan, without the word rabbi, a tone like that. Secondly, he asked me, who is at the head of Mazecha? I don't even know what that means. What does Mazecha mean? Menachem said to him, my friend, if you want to complain, tell me the whole story. What did you first send to him? He said, well, this was the case. I sent a problem about a woman who was inheriting money, and the words I wrote were, my friend, Rabbi Huna, without the word rabbi, peace be with you, collect 10% for this woman. Menachem said, a person who doesn't know what Mazecha is, how do you send to Rav Huna, my friend? my friend. You have to ask him, my rabbi. In any event, Mazecha means an abel, one who is in mourning. Who sits at the head of the table in the house of mourning? The answer is that when there is a meal, the abel is supposed to sit at the head of the table. He said this in the form of the Gemara word for abel, a mourner, Mazecha, to show that he was superior to Rav Anan. The wording should have been different. The question is, though, an interesting point to note. And Huda sent back this message. Should I collect from the real estate? Real estate means ground, actual estate. Or from tangible items. Why did he also attach the second question about an abel sitting at the head of the table? What is the connection between these two? He could have sent any other question. He didn't pick out at random a point about mourner. Must have been some connection there. The answer is that what was the first question? Why did he ask, should I collect from real estate or from tangible items? The reason he asked that question was because what is the difference? The rule is that if one inherits money from a parent, he inherits everything, whether it's real estate, or whether it's tangible items, or whether it's cash, no matter what it is, everything is inherited. So if, let's say there are 3 sons, they divide this inheritance, they divide everything that the father left over, real estate and other items too. His question was, what is this daughter? When we say that a daughter collects 10%, is that law of 10% she collects it from the father as a law of inheritance, and therefore she is supposed to collect that from the tangible items too? That's the same 10%, but it can be taken out of anything at all. Or does she collect it not from the father as inheritance, but it is a debt that the children, the sons, have to pay to her? The 10% comes not from the father, but the sons. The father leaves the entire inheritance to the sons, and they now become responsible to pay the sister, that is the daughter of the father, 10% from what they have inherited. What happens then? Then that means that she is a creditor. They owe her a debt of 10%. What is the law of a creditor? If you borrow money from somebody, he can come and take from anything that you own as part of that debt. He can take it for your real estate, he can take it if you haven't got the cash, or he can take it for any of your belongings. But what if a man borrows money, and then the man dies? The debt is now handed down to his children, the orphans. There we have a clearly stipulated law in the Gemara, in the Torah, that orphans are not required to pay the debt of their father from anything but real estate only. Any tangible items they have cannot be collected from by creditors. This belongs to the orphans. And therefore, in this case, the question was, clearly, he asked, do we consider this daughter as one who inherits, and therefore she could take that 10% from anything at all, or is she a creditor, and therefore she collects from the brothers who are orphans, and the rule then is that she collects only from the real estate and not from anything else. And that's why he added the second question, to prove what the answer is. If you are sharp, the second question will answer the first. Who are the real mourners? Who sits at the head of the table? Head of the table is naturally the son. The sons sit at the head of the table, which means that they are the real mourners. They are the mourners, they are the orphans, they are the ones who inherit. The daughter does not sit at the head of the table, which means she's not considered the real mourner. Of course she is too, he's also orphaned. But in a legal sense, he's not considered an orphan in the sense of inheriting. So, therefore, the law of a daughter collecting is only from the real estate and not from tangible items. Of course, there was also a gerush included here. The gerush is speaking about orphans. The Jews today leaving their mother, the Shekhinah, the Eretz Yisrael, are like orphans. The orphan, they are sons or daughters. Which one of the two? Until Mashiach comes, we are considered like daughters. Hashem said, I will give you the land of Israel as an inheritance. An inheritance? This will be considered an inheritance, your part of the world. What does the world consist of? How many nations of Goyim? A total of 70 nations. Hashem said, you are only like daughters to me. And therefore, as a daughter, you receive 10%. And the Jews went into Eretz Yisrael, who was there that they had to drive out? The 7 nations of Canaan, the 7 Arab nations. These they drove out, this land they inherited, because the 7 is 1/10 of the 70 nations. So until Mashiach comes, they receive 1/10 of the inheritance, 7 nations out of 70. When Mashiach comes, the Jews will be considered like a son who receives all the inheritance. And then Mashiach will come and will wipe out all the evil nations. The Jews will inherit all. That Hashem very shortly. The Gemara says that Rabbi Nachman said, there's a pasuk in Kohelet by Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, who says that it is better to go to the house of an Abel, the house of mourning, and to go to a place where a feast, a happy occasion is taking place. Why is it better? Because this is the end of all people, end of every person. And therefore, those who are alive will take this lesson to heart and remind themselves of their ultimate destination. Meaning, remember that they have to face death, they should prepare themselves for it. Ordinarily, it means that when he hears the eulogy being said about the dead person, remember that he too will someday reach his point of death, and they'll be crying over him and eulogizing him. The main lesson, though, is that the Gemara says, woe is to he who eulogizes, and the one who delivers this eulogy, this oratory, the last moment, the time of burial, before a person is buried, usually a rabbi, the one who speaks about the person who died. Why woe is to him? Because the heaven is very particular, very angry about any praises said about a dead person that he does not deserve. Any person who bestows praises on him he does not warrant, that person will be revenged. That is, will take revenge from him from heaven. He then adds, though, that just as much as the person who is eulogizing will be punished, so too will the dead person be punished also. The question is, why? What fault is it of the dead person? What did he do wrong? How can he help it? He's lying there helplessly. He can't say a word. He can't object to this talk being said about him. Why should he be punished for some false statements being made by the rabbi or the person eulogizing him? The answer is, here we see. Go to the house of an Abel and watch, see what happens. See this person who's delivering this eulogy, and you will see how the lies come forth, and know that the reason these lies are coming forth for this dead person is because the dead person himself once lied about a different dead person during his lifetime. Therefore, he's receiving these false praises too, which he'll be punished. Not because of the false praises he's receiving, he's punished because he did exactly the same act. Go to this funeral, watch what's going on, and guard yourself from ever giving these praises to a person who's dead, because if you do, you'll be praised in turn, and have these false things said about you, which means then you'll be punished also. So careful should a person be about any words that he says about the dead or in general. A person's tongue should be guarded very carefully at all times. The Bet Yosef adds, though, that we cannot help but to extend some praises about the person who's dead. It would be very unfitting to come to a funeral and to speak about a dead person and tell about his faults, tell about the sins he committed. That would certainly be wrong. So what we do is we omit his bad qualities. We speak about the potential good qualities he possessed. This you are allowed to do. If the person's good qualities were very limited, you are allowed to add slightly to them. This permission is granted by the Bet Yosef. You're allowed to add a small percentage to it, but don't go wild with compliments with qualities the person does not really possess. And that's why attending a funeral, if possible, one should forewarn the speaker to be careful, tell him exactly what qualities the person did have. You can speak about those freely, but not to add things like this person was a philanthropist, he gave tzedakah wildly during his life, he gave more than the average, or he was unusually good to his family, or things that people know was not true. The few qualities he did have, you may speak about them, but even that, as briefly as possible. The true, real, beneficial eulogy is to awaken in people, the survivors, those who are alive and listening, awaken in them the realization that death is ultimate. Death cannot be avoided by anyone, and that those who are wise should prepare for it, thereby guiding yourself, your life, so that sins are avoided and mitzvot are accomplished. Even it says there are cases where a person's small children, let me know, Pastor Shalom, pass away. Why does a person have his small children pass away? We can understand a child passing away because this child is a gilgul of someone, and he had to come back to this life for a year or two. Why was this child born to this set of parents? Why should they go through this torture? The answer is that it is due to pledges, promises. The person whose custom it is to pledge, make a pledge for charity, not to fulfill it, the penalty is that his children pass away. So if that person makes a pledge at that time, doesn't fulfill it, then he is the one to whom this neshama is given, this child is born. Let that person be the one to suffer for it. In fact, even it says that it's not just the children, even a chas v'shalom a person's wife. How careful one should be in making a pledge, making a vow, because sometimes even if a vow is made and kept, the sin is still that great that it can cause this type of tragedy. Even it says that there are some cases where a woman can be divorced. In the case of a divorce, the woman collects the ketubah, whatever the ketubah states, if it's $200 minimum, or could be anything, unlimited amount. If a man divorces his wife, she collects that money. But there are cases where a man can divorce his wife and she goes out without receiving a penny. If she commits one certain crime, specifically, there are certain types of cases, of course, where she defrauded him, she pretended to be religious and she's not. Those are separate cases, but that's because he married her erroneously, through error. But if he married her and she did not fool him in any way, and later on she committed this one specific act, she loses all rights to the claim to the ketubah. And that is, if she curses his parents. A wife who curses a husband's parents not only receives a divorce, but loses the money of the ketubah. Not only that, But even if she does not curse his parents in front of the husband, even if she does so in front of the husband's children, meaning in front of her children, even when the father is not there, the father meaning her husband is not there, and she speaks to the children, so though her husband is not present, she still has the same obligation to respect her in-laws, her husband's parents, not to speak badly of them in front of his children. What she thinks about in her own mind without saying it, of course, is something else. But this shows, too, how, again, the Yemena shows these examples of how a person should guard his tongue, how dangerous a person's tongue is, and that's why the Yemena says that Hashem created a barrier, two barriers before the tongue, a barrier of bone, that's the teeth, and a barrier of flesh, that's the lips. The person can close these two barriers to seal off the sword of destruction, the person's tongue. The person, in order to guard the tongue, the Chafetz Chaim Zal wrote a whole sefer called Shmirat HaLashon, guarding one's tongue. The best guard for the tongue is to train the tongue to speak only words of Torah and holiness, and that way the tongue will automatically protect the rest of the organs of the body. And speaking words of holiness, there's words of Torah, words of tefillah, words of praise to Hashem, praise of tzadikim. The entire Torah is then guarded, and the zechut of these words of Kedusha, the Jews will be worthy of redemption, will be zochet to see the Biat Mashiach Tzidkenu, Yad Bet HaMikdash, V'hei B'Yameinu, Amen, V'Yamen. We continue the Shiur in Gemara. Gemara says there's a pasuk in Tehillim, L'Tzion Yamar Ish Va'ish Yulad Ba Uhu Yechorneha Elyon. That means that Hashem says about Zion, which is Eretz Yisrael, a man and a man who is born there, he will eventually be elevated when Mashiach comes to great height and glory. Even says what's meant by a man and a man who's born there, period. Why does it say twice? Even it says that Eretz Yisrael is different, than any other land, than any other country. The nature is that a person born in a certain country considers himself that type of native. He is born in England, he is an Englishman. He's born in France, he's a Frenchman. If he's born in France, he will not call himself an Englishman. He calls himself according to the land the land of his birth. Eretz Yisrael is different. There are two types of people, two types of Jews. A Jew who is born in Eretz Yisrael, a native-born Israeli, and a Jew born anywhere else, but whose heart is in Eretz Yisrael, who lives with the thought of Eretz Yisrael, the desire to get there, and nothing else is more important in his mind as far as geographical location in the world. He might be living in America, but to him, America is, at best, secondary in importance. So here the Torah says, King David says, that whether a man is born there, or whether a man is born elsewhere, but considers himself an Israeli, and his heart is in Israel, these two people are both alike. Both will see the Geulah, the Mashiach comes, they'll both receive the same merit, the same credits. They are both considered Israelis. They're both considered Tzion, part of Tzion. Now, this, of course, speaks about the coming of Mashiach. This means, how can we test a person to know whether his heart is really in Israel? The way to do that simply is, if you tell somebody about some tragedy that occurred in a certain place, the person has humanitarian feelings, he feels very sad about what happened, he takes it to heart a little, and of course he's not happy about this news. But he cannot really feel the pain and the sorrow because he doesn't know the people living in that area, that city, or that country. So it's a minor feeling of sadness. If you tell someone about a tragedy that occurred in his home city, where he knows the people there, his family, relatives, all the people there, his friends, and tell him something wrong happened, something was destroyed there, that person will really cry over this tragedy. Now here you have Jews who are not living in Eretz Yisrael, they were born in different countries, they were never in Israel, never spent much time there, and yet tell a Jew, remind a Jew about the suffering of Eretz Yisrael at the hands of its enemies, they feel just as badly as one in Eretz Yisrael who sees the Churban Bet HaMikdash. He cannot approach the area of the Bet HaMikdash. He sees this is in the hands of the Goyim. He sees how desecrated this place is. The person there can feel the tragedy in his heart better because he sees it. Yet a Jew living elsewhere, a remote point on the globe, it has that same feeling of sadness, same feeling of remorse over what occurred in the Churban Bet HaMikdash. This Jew is a son of Zion. So about both of these, the Torah says, whether he is born there or whether he looks forward and anticipates with relish the thought of being there, going there, living there, these two are alike in the eyes of Hashem. And the Gemara adds, what about, let's compare the Jew, an Israeli living in Israel, and one living in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. Compare them mentally, sharpness. Mentally, of course, means in wisdom of Torah. The Gemara says, Abaye says, that one Israeli is as good as two of us. Us means these rabbis are speaking in Babylon at the time, Talmud Bavly, meaning those in Babel or those in any other country outside of Israel. The Israelis are much wiser. The Talmidei Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael are much better in knowledge, greater Chachamim, than the Chachamim outside of Israel. And one simple reason for that is, the Gemara says that the Torah is considered to like iron, metal, steel. And if you take steel, two pieces, and rub them together, they become sharpened, honed to a very sharp degree. Take a piece of metal by itself, it never becomes sharp. The same thing with Torah. If you have two people studying Torah together, no matter if one is better than the other or not, it makes no difference. But by studying together, one sharpens the other's mind. Each one sharpens the other. They can accomplish much more. A Talmid Chacham, no matter how great he is, if he learns by himself, and his learning is of not much value, he cannot really delve deeply or advance himself. And the Gemara tells us that the Talmidei Chachamim in Israel were very friendly. They got along perfectly together. So they could study together and sharpen each other. But those in Babel at the time had this disunity, disharmony, and therefore they generally studied by themselves. Now, simply, we say that one Israeli is like two of Babel because in Israel they had two studying together, so each one was like two. In Babel they learned by themselves individually, so you have each one is only like one. That's why the ratio was 2-1. Second reason is that if one from Israel is sharper because the Gemara says in Batra that the air of Israel itself is blessed, is endowed with the power of being machkim, giving chachma, wisdom. The Gemara says in Kiddushin that Hashem sent a certain percentage of wisdom to the world, or 10 degrees of wisdom to the entire world. 9/10 of all wisdom bestowed upon the world was sent to Eretz Yisrael. The air itself is filled with the kedusha. A person breathing that air becomes wise. And Medrash in Eicha says that whenever an Israeli went to visit anywhere, people would gather around him just to hear him speak, to hear these gems of wisdom. That's why the Gemara says that though we, the rabbis of Bavel, rabbis of the Gemara, are great, but still one rabbi of Israel is twice as good as we are. The Gemara adds, but despite that, if one of us outside of Israel goes to Israel, then he becomes not equal to the Israelis, but twice as great as they are. Not only does he reach their degree, their height, but he becomes twice as great as they. The reason is that at that time, the Chachamim in Bavel were much sharper. That's why we have two Shas, two sets of Gemarot. Shas Bavly, the Shas Gemarot that were made in Bavel, and Shas Yerushalmi, one made in Jerusalem, in Eretz Yisrael. And the Shas that we generally learn, all Jews learn, is Shas Bavly, much more so than Shas Yerushalmi. There are some, of course, who learn Shas Yerushalmi also, but that's only also. The main Shas, the main Talmud, the main Gemara is the one made in Bavel, because the rabbis, they were sharper, and the Gemara is arranged in a manner where we could arrive at the halakha, the final decision in law, much more easily than we could for the Shas Yerushalmi. So that the sharpness of mind, those in Bavel were sharper. Those in Yerushalayim had the advantage of, an Israeli advantage of the air, which itself is filled with this wisdom. For this air, this avnid is machkim. Just breathing the air makes a person wise. And when one from Bavel would go up to Israel, he would have both qualities. He'd have the air plus the sharpness of mind, and that's why he'd be able to even bypass the Israelis. That's the physical sense. Spiritual sense, the reason is simply that one living in Israel is to be very much envied. It's a big zechut. He's born in Israel. He's proud of it. The person was born in a land of kedusha, holiness. He is spending his life there. Where does he live? Where does he eat? Where does he sleep? In Israel. Constantly, 24 hours a day, he breathes that holy air. He walks on the holy soil. So, of course, he's to be envied. But at the same time, there is something much higher than that. The person who lives outside of Israel and who is not well off, is not in a financial condition where he can easily make the trip, or there are other difficulties, other barriers, obstacles that would stop him from getting to Israel. And despite this, he goes all out to overcome all these barriers and obstacles. And because of that fiery desire, that craving to get to the Holy Land, he overcomes everything and arrives there, reaches Eretz Yisrael. That zechut is so great that he's now considered twice as good as any Israeli who was born there. Because we don't know if that Israeli who was born there would have been there if he was outside of Israel. He's born there, so he's there. Had he been outside there, he would have had barriers to stop him from getting there. Perhaps he might not have gotten there. Here we have one who was actually tested. He's not an Israeli, he's born outside of Israel, he's living outside of Israel, there are difficulties in getting there, and he overcame these difficulties. This person, therefore, becomes twice as great as a native Israeli. The Gemara says to prove this, one rabbi, Rabbi Nachman, was not one of the best students in his class in Bavel. In fact, when the rabbis in the yeshiva studied Torah, Rabbi Nachman had very much difficulty in understanding what was being said. He couldn't follow well the lesson. It means he was weaker than the average. And then he went up to Eretz Yisrael, and he studied there for a long time. And there he would always refer to the wise men of Bavel as Bablai Tipshai, those fools back there in Bavel. The ones that were superior to him before, he couldn't even follow their lessons, now he called them fools, which proves how a person can advance himself mentally in learning if he goes to Eretz Yisrael. Though he may be weak outside of Israel, he goes there, his mind becomes so sharpened, he'll become greater than all those he left behind. Which means in actual ratio, a person advances to exactly 4 times as great as he was. Because before he goes to Israel, an Israeli is twice as great as he is. When he gets to Israel, he is then twice as great as an Israeli, which means 4 times as much as he had before. This is the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, and how much every single Jew should strive with everything he has to be zocheh, to get to Eretz Yisrael. Of course, for the sake of Kedusha. A person who goes there, has to shalom with any other motive, that person cannot become part of Eretz Yisrael. That person will not be given any of the wisdom of the air of Eretz Yisrael. That person cannot receive any Kedusha by walking in Israel. And in fact, the Torah says that the land itself will expel that person. The land refuses to absorb any aliyah of any person who comes there with the wrong intentions, without the proper respect for the holiness of the land. No matter what the person may be like, if he hasn't got that respect, that love for Eretz Yisrael, then that person is not accepted by Eretz Yisrael. The person is expelled automatically. But a person who is zochet to have this ahavat Eretz Yisrael, this love for it, there Eretz Yisrael brings this person close. It's like a mother who brings a child very close to herself and nourishes that child with everything that is in the power of the mother. So that Eretz Yisrael give of all its blessings, fruit, to the person who comes there with the proper, pure intentions. The Gemara says there's a certain type of disease called Bale Hadatan, which means a mental disease. It's a type of a leprosy of the brain. A certain type of germ gets into a person's brain, and this disease is very harmful. It is so harmful, more so because it's extremely contagious. The Gemara says that the rabbis were very careful to stay away from those people afflicted with this disease. One rabbi refused to sit close to the area where the insects, the flies, who might carry this disease from these afflicted ones, might carry them to him, so he stayed a very remote distance from them. Another rabbi refused to sit where the air itself, the wind might carry some of that the germs through the air to him. Another rabbi wasn't that particular, but he would not enter a home where these diseased people work. Others refused to eat any food that entered their area, because the food might become contaminated. It's so contagious is this disease, and so dangerous. The Gemara says it's going to be Yehoshua ben Levi, one of the greatest rabbis at that time. He was, of course, an Amorah, which means the later rabbis of the Gemara. But in his time, he was one of the greatest, well, let's say the greatest. He felt that these people were being neglected. They are diseased, they're no fault of their own. They're stricken. Why should they lose out on the opportunity to study Torah? He would go to them, go into their homes, and sit close to them. And if it was cold, he would take a blanket and cover himself and this diseased person with one single blanket, press close together, and study Torah, without any fear whatsoever of getting this disease. His claim was, the pasuk says about the Torah protects a person, one who studies it. So if the Torah, it brings charm, affection to the person, then it protects the person. So therefore he said, I have no fear whatsoever. I will continue to help these poor souls in the study of Torah. Let them have a means of learning too. He spent a lot of time with them throughout his life. The Gemara says that When a time came for Yeshua ben Levi to pass away, of course the notice is given, there's a slip given to an angel. He's told this is the name of the next person, the angel of death. This is the name of the person you must bring now, bring his soul to heaven. And the angel of death is infallible. He just about never misses. Just about. But the mission is always completed. Now the angel that was told in heaven, go bring the soul of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But because of the fact that he allowed himself to risk, to jeopardize his health, his life, in teaching these baledat and these diseased people, therefore, before you take his soul, give him anything he wants. Agree to any request he makes. This is the order to the angel of death. And so he descended and came before the Yeshua Levi and revealed himself. He showed himself before he took his life. The person sees the angel of death at the moment that he actually dies. Here he showed himself, and he said to the Yeshua Levi, I came to take you, but before I do, make any request you want. And Yeshua Levi said, fine. I want you to first take me to Gan Eden and show me my place. I want to see exactly where my place in Gan Eden is. The angel not agreed. He took him up as an angel. He took him to heaven, took him to Gan Eden, and on the way, he said to the angel of death, to travel with you it's frightening. The appearance of the angel of death itself can scare someone. So he said, while we're going, in order to be certain that I'm not frightened out of my wits, I want you to give me your sword. That's a sword the angel of death carries, with which he takes the life of his victim. In other words, it's a whole process, how it goes about. He drops a bitter drop into the mouth of the person, and the person sees the angel of death, and then his soul comes out. He describes this whole thing. The sword is the symbol of the weapon of death, the angel of death. So the Menachem Mendel gave Yeshua Levi his sword, which rendered him impotent. Without that sword, he could not kill. When they get to the place in Gan Eden, there's a special wall there, and the Yeshua Levi looked over the wall and saw the place. He leaped over this wall into Gan Eden and said, now I'm safe. You cannot get me. The angel of death grabbed him over the wall to pull him back. Pull him back out of Gan Eden, because you can't get there without dying. You can't go through the process of death. The Yeshua Levi said, you can't take me because, and he swore. He gave it out of chavruta. It's very sacred. He swore that he will not come with him. What happens then? To take him means he's in a force of Yeshua Levi to break his swear. Plus the additional fact that he couldn't even take him if he wanted to, because the Yeshua Levi had his sword. So he was in a quandary, the angel of death. Meanwhile, what happened was that back at the ranch, back at home, on Earth, there is no death going on. People would fall out of a window, they would land very softly, they wouldn't die. There'd be an explosion, there'd be a war going on, soldiers stabbing each other, and nothing happens. There's no angel of death, there's no death. So for a short while there was pandemonium. Things were going wild. A voice came from heaven to solve this problem. Two problems. One, the sword, the return of the sword to the Menachem Mendel. And two, what about this Shuvah? He had sworn. A voice came from heaven, even this is the voice of Hashem, and said that let's investigate the Yeshua Levi and see if he has sworn before in his lifetime, and he has kept that shavua, he fulfilled what he swore, that's one thing. But if he has sworn and he has not fulfilled it, not that Chas v'Shalom he broke the vow, but he had the vow removed by a chacham, that's the second thing. These are the two possibilities. He swore before in his life, he either fulfilled the vow, he made a vow and he fulfilled it, or he made a vow and he had this vow removed by a chacham. Now the law of neder or shavua is, the person should never make a vow at all. He should never swear. If he does, he cannot break that shavua. But, which is better? He made a vow, let's say, to eat a certain type of food one day. Is it better to eat that food and thereby fulfill his vow, or is it better to go to a chacham? A rabbi has the power of removing the vow completely. Literally remove it as though it never been made. By moving the vow, he now could eat it or not eat it. He's not restricted anymore. He's not bound anymore. The same as a husband can remove the vow of a wife. The difference is that if a wife makes a vow, the husband may remove the vow only on the day that he hears about this vow. If he lets it go for that day, on the next day he's powerless. He has power on that day alone. A chacham could remove a vow of any person anytime if he comes to him and shows his regrets that he's sorry for it. The same as we had the story of Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law, who made a vow not to support his daughter, not to give her anything. Then Rabbi Akiva removed this vow from his father-in-law called Basavua. This is the power that Torah gives to a chacham to remove the vow of a person. Now the Gemara says, which is better, to fulfill the vow or to remove it? The Gemara says certainly to remove the vow. A person who makes a vow itself is wrong. It's like building a mizbeach, an altar for avodah zarah. That's bad enough. If he fulfills the vow, it's like bringing a sacrifice to avodah zarah. Though he's fulfilling the vow. What should he do? Remove the vow completely. Except in certain cases where it is permissible. The Gemara speaks about certain types of nidarim, vows, that are permissible to make. A person knows that he hasn't got the patience to sit down and study Torah for an hour, and nothing can make him do it. So a person would give him $100 for that hour. He couldn't sit there and study. The Gemara says there are nidrei zinuzin, which means a person makes a vow. He knows that by breaking a vow, as we learned before, break a vow, his children die, chas v'shalom. The worst things happen. By making a vow in a year, he knows now he can't break it. This nidrei zinuzin, where he can now feel that he's obligated. So this vow is kedusha. It'll help him to study Torah or to do any mitzvah which he's weak in. That type of vow is permissible, again, in certain cases. Nowadays, people are that weak that it's better not to make a vow at all. Ordinarily, a vow should not be made, except in these cases. Now, the question was in the case of the Yeshua Levi, Hashem said, investigate his case. Investigate means, of course, Hashem knows. But for the sake of those trying him now, investigate and find out, did he fulfill the vow he made, or did he have the vow removed? If you find that he fulfilled the vow that he made, instead of having it removed, then the angel of death cannot touch him. He remains in Gan Eden, he cannot be touched by the angel of death. If you find that he had the vow removed, which would seem to be better, as the Gemara says, if he had his vow removed by a chacham, then he's got to go back with the angel of death. This is the decision of Hashem. One that's very difficult to understand. Because after all, as we had said, we learned that it's certainly better in all cases to remove the vow rather than fulfill it. Why should we say here that if he fulfilled the vow, he carried it out, then he is immune from the angel of death, he remains in Gan Eden forever without having gone through the process of death? Which, of course, is what they found. He had made vows without removing them. And therefore he remained in Gan Eden. He was one of those who left this world without dying at all. He went straight to Gan Eden without dying. But why is this better in his case? The answer is that the same thing happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. When the angel of death, knowing that Moshe Rabbeinu was about to pass away, said to Hashem, "Let me go down and take his soul." Very thrilling for him. This is his greatest conquest. He waited for so long to finally get the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, whom he could not touch or come near, because the angel of death is also the Satan, the Yitzhahara. And he could never get anything on Moshe Rabbeinu during his lifetime. No slightest trace of sin. At least now he can get his neshama. So Hashem said to the Menachem Mendel that you cannot even get close to him as the angel of death. He's far too holy for you. Then the Midrash says that he tried and he was driven away quickly. Had no power to come near Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, the reason is, what made Moshe Rabbeinu so great? That he was the greatest one alive in his generation. How do we test that? Because, as we said, to remove a vow, it takes a chacham. Remove the vow of an ordinary layman, and an haaretz who makes that vow. And that's the same as a husband and wife. Just as a husband rules over the wife, he has the power to remove the vow of the wife. So too, a chacham has the power to remove the vow of one beneath him. What about a chacham who has no superior? There's no one greater than him. How can he have his vow removed? It's impossible then. His vow must then be fulfilled. It shows he's the greatest tzadik in the world. This was the case of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because he was that great, Menachem Mendel could not get near him. This Hashem said is a test in the case of the Yeshua and Levi. If he had his vow removed, that means he has a rabbi over him. He's not the greatest one alive. The angel of death could get to him. But if he never had his vow removed, though it's better to have it removed, but he couldn't get it because there's no chacham bigger than him, that means he's the greatest tzaddik alive, and the Menachem Mendel could not get close to him. And this is why, since he was the greatest tzaddik alive then, there's no possibility of the Menachem Mendel to get to him. Of course, there's a slight question involved here where the Gemara says that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu at one time, swore to punish the Jews for their sins of the desert. They would have a Bet HaMikdash that's going to be destroyed. This was a swear by Hashem. The Gemara says, if only Moshe Rabbeinu had that moment, made the right move in saying to Hashem, I hereby remove your vow. I'm a chacham, I can remove your vow, and that's it. Take away that swear vow of Hashem. We would have been saved. The question here is, if you need someone greater than you to remove a vow, how could the vow of Hashem be removed by Moshe Rabbeinu, a student? The answer is, again, that the Torah is no longer in heaven. Hashem gave the Torah to earth, and in many cases in the Gemara where a question of law arose, the question was, who's going to decide the law? Will heaven decide it, or earth? The answer is the Torah is now on earth. The rabbis on earth have the power to decide any legal question. No voice in heaven can decide a legal question anymore. Hashem gave the Torah to the rabbis on earth. They are the ones to decide it. So therefore, when Hashem gave the Torah, He said to the Chacham on earth, I give the power to remove a vow. So even Kaviyachol, so we can say that if Chacham on earth to remove a vow to anybody, even in heaven, Kaviyachol, a vow of Hashem removed by Moshe Rabbeinu. In the case of Yeshua and Levi, though, there's no one greater than him, and therefore, because of the fact that he was the greatest one alive, the Menachem cannot get to him, you may get anything. Second question was, what about the sword? Again, a voice came from heaven and said to Yeshua and Levi, give back the sword. Why? Because it is needed for others. Not for you. You're safe. You will not be touched by it. But others are not immune to death. Death must go on until Mashiach comes, until Tchiyat HaMetim, then will come back to life. Until that time, there must be death on earth. When Rabbi Shimon Levi heard this, of course he was forced to give back the sword, but he felt at least safe enough that he was out of danger for him. Thus, his guide left him, the Melech so he was left there in Gan Eden, and he found now that Eliyahu Navi took him and started to lead him to his place in Gan Eden. Eliyahu Navi called out, he cried out, "Make way for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Make way for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi." Make way means make room. He has a place here. The question is, why did he say it twice? The answer is that every tzadik has his place in Gan Eden. That's established for him, as there is for every Jew. But he also has, being that great, the Gan Eden that is lost by a Rasha. A Rasha who loses his Gan Eden, that Gan Eden doesn't go to waste. It's given to the tzadik. And therefore, the Navi said, make way for the place of Rabbi Shimon Levi, his place in Gan Eden, plus the place he has earned as a tzadik to inherit the lost ones of the Rishayim. Now, while he was going along, he met Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal in heaven, who was sitting on a throne, 13 pillows in that throne, very high throne in heaven. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal is considered one of the greatest tzaddikim of all time, but in heaven he saw a leader. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal said to Rabbi Shimon Levi, "Are you Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi?" And he answered, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, during your time, during your life, was the rainbow ever seen by people during your life?" Shimon Levi said, "Yes, it was." Shimon Yochai said, "In that case, you're not Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi." So Yeshua Levi was announced in heaven as the biggest tzaddik on earth, and the biggest tzaddik on earth is so great that he protects the world from this rainbow. Protects it means the rainbow is a symbol that Hashem will not again bring a flood to destroy the world. Why? The world deserves this to be destroyed because of its evil deeds, because Hashem himself had made a vow that never again will he have a flood like in the days of Noah. Because of this vow, the world is saved. The rainbow is the symbol of that vow. But where there is a very holy tzaddik, whose zechut is so great that it protects the entire world, we don't need the rainbow to show us this vow of Hashem to protect the world. We don't need that vow to protect us. We have the tzaddik to protect us. Therefore, in the days of the tzaddik, the rainbow is not seen. This is what the Gemara says, in the days of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal, there was never a rainbow seen. In your case, he said, if you say there was a rainbow in your time, you are not Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Gemara says it wasn't so. It's true that there was no rainbow in his time. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was very modest. He didn't want to show himself to be that great, so he said there was. What about this rainbow? The idea of the rainbow? The rainbow itself is a natural phenomena that comes about, that can be seen in the heavens only the time of rain. That's why it's called a rainbow. The time of rain, the sky begins to clear, and the sun begins to shine. This dampness shows itself in a bow of different colors. The sun's rays going to the liquid, put a glass of water in front of the sun, you'll find a rainbow too. So that this means there is rain, and then you have this rainbow. The tzaddik is one who helps the people to have their rain in the right time. The Gemara says rain by day is not pleasant. People have to travel, they have to go to work, and then it's very unpleasant to be caught in the rain. So when is the right time for rain? At night, when no one is out on the road. So, in the case of a tzaddik, this pasuk Hashem gives the rain in the right time which is advantageous for everyone, which is at night. That's why at night you cannot see the rainbow. So there is a rainbow, but it's not seen. You have rain, you don't see a rainbow. But actually, if there was no rainbow, it means there's no rain. That would be a curse, Chas v'shalom. It means only that it's not seen because of the fact that it's not during the time when there's sun out. In any event, the point was that Rabbi Shimon Levi did protect his generation. He was that great that there was no rainbow seen during his time. The Gemara says Rabbi Hanina bar Papa was also a very great tzadik. He lived much later. And again, when he was about to pass away, the heavenly Malach Mavit was told to go down and fulfill his last desire. He came down, he revealed himself, and Yechonina Papa said to the Malach Mavit, give me a postponement, additional 30 days time, so that I can spend this time in reviewing all the Gemara and Torah that I have studied. Because the Torah says, Ashrei, blessed and fortunate is he who comes to heaven with all his studies in his hand. That means he's reviewed all the Torah he has learned, and comes prepared with all his knowledge. I want to have time to review all the Torah I have studied. This is his request, and it was agreed upon. The angel of death came back after 30 days. Again, he revealed himself, and this time the Papa said to him, before you take me, I want you to show me my place in Gan Eden. So he said, good, I have to fulfill your request. He said, first, give me your sword. He said, don't frighten me. But Hanavet said, I've had experience before with that. No, sir, I don't surrender my sword to you. The Papa said, well, all right, let's bring this to a test. Bring a Sefer Torah. There's a Torah, Shulchan Aruch. And let's go through every single detail, every letter in the Torah, and every law that's applied to these letters, and show me one item that I have not fulfilled in my life, or one item that I broke in my lifetime. Any sin I've done, or any mitzvah I've not fulfilled. You find one, I don't deserve this request. If you don't, why shouldn't I deserve it? Melech HaMamed answered, no question about the fact that you have fulfilled every detail, every iota in the Torah. But you have never spent time closely with those who are afflicted with this contagious mental disease. And therefore, you cannot be granted so big a request. That mitzvah you haven't got, and it was only that mitzvah was given Yeshua Levi the power to be able to demand the sword of the Melech HaMamed. He later says that he couldn't get this request fulfilled. And when he was nistalek, there was a sheet of fire that separated his coffin from the rest of the people, the world. The sheet of fire was a symbol from heaven that he was greater than all. They couldn't come close to him until the sheet of fire paid its respects, then they could first bury him. Now, it did not remove itself. It couldn't get close to the coffin for a while. And one of the rabbis came close and said, please, for the sake of all the chachamim, let us bury your coffin. Let us bury it. And there was no reply. I mean, the sheet of fire remained. But he said, for the sake of your father, again, no response. And he said, for the sake of your own kavod, it's for your kavod to be buried this way, not the kavod of a mit, one who passes away to be buried. This way we cannot bury you. And then the sheet of fire moved itself and they were able to bury him. The Gemara says that this could not happen to anyone who failed to fulfill even the slightest letter of the Torah, which means that the Frida Pata was so perfect, so complete, and that's why he deserved to have this special treatment. The point is, we once mentioned this, and it's very vital to know. According to the words of Rabbi Arizal, what is really the greatness of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi? He went to these people who were physically afflicted, and he jeopardized himself. There are many doctors, but not doctors, many good people who do this for the sake of helping a fellow Jew who's in trouble. They risk their lives too. What makes this so much greater than anything in existence? The answer is that when we speak about a person whose mind is diseased, it doesn't mean a germ. It means a person whose mind is spiritually diseased. One who reads books of philosophy, Baminan, well, this is a disease that is fatal, a mentally fatal disease. And this is one where there is no cure at all. This is one where nobody can attempt to cure it, because if you speak to a person who has that poison of philosophy in his mind, you cannot cure him. You can only get that poison yourself, Chas v'shalom. Rabbi Yeshua lady was so great that he said, I will not let these Jews be destroyed by this. I will risk myself to teach them to them, to show them the pure, true points of emunah, of faith, and have these people who have this malignant, fatal disease, have them receive an opportunity to be cured from this. Because he risked himself, a risk not to himself physically, many Jews do that, but he risked his neshama spiritually. This was so great a zechut for himself, so big in tzadik, that this elevated him to a point far above the greatest of malachim, above the angel of death. And this is the power of the tzadik emet.